The key to a successful organization is to have a culture based on a strongly held and widely shared set of beliefs that are supported by strategy and structure. When an organization has a strong culture, three things happen, which is number one, employees know how top management wants them to respond to any situation. Number two, employees believe that expected response is the proper one. And the last one is the employee know that they will be rewarded for demonstrating the organization values. Now, the question is, does organization have a culture that encourage performance or have that environment or psychological safety environment? A very warm welcome to the season 4 of EI Cafe with Azim. I'm your host, Azim Saeed, a human capital specialist, a Lego Serious Play facilitator, ICF certified coach, and emotional intelligence practitioner. Here we are again for another interesting topic, a 30 minutes of valuable learning. Just to remind you that inspiring people made much more possible and stronger with Bristol Institute, which is our exclusive knowledge partner. Bristol Institute, affiliated to University of West of England, which is ranked 21 in UK and the highest ranked university in Sri Lanka. For more information, please do check in the podcast note. So in today's topic, we are going to talk about culture, not just culture, the corporate culture. The whole idea of the conversation is about influence of corporate culture on employee and overall organizational performance. To discuss this, I have a colleague who is joining me in a specialist on this particular area. He is the designer of Culture Design Canvas to help design future-proof teams and organizations. He is an avid writer and contributor to Psychological Today, Forbes, Thrive Global, Medium, and many more. Before he ventured the journey of fearless culture, he was the EVP of Leoben Chicago, CEO Euro RSG New York and Argentina. He states, most organizations don't lack ideas, but a conducive culture. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Gustavo Razzetti, founder and workplace culture consultant at Fearless Culture. Gustavo, officially welcome to the cafe.
Hello, Asim. Thank you for having me here. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here as well.
So, Gustavo, thank you very much for spending your valuable time. I know it's very early morning in that part of the world. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation and joining in this particular whole episode. And it's a great pleasure to have you as well. Gustavo, you heard the topic, you heard the introduction. It's about your favorite area as well, organization culture. Because most of the people have been talking about culture, creating that culture. Now the famous word is psychological safety, creating that psychological safety in terms of culture. So a lot of vibes going around the world about creating that particular culture, especially after the pandemic, right? The whole global pandemic, working from home, hybrid work, people need getting into new cultural norms. So it's really it's important for us to talk in this particular topic and let our audience and the whole globe know that what exactly we are talking about. So in that context, let me open the question like this. Why is culture fit important in the workplace? What would be your take, Gustavo?
Absolutely, thank you. I think that the first thing that we need to agree on, or at least try to clarify, is what is culture, right? Because everyone talks about culture, but you mentioned also psychological safety. In the business world, we're very good at using buzzwords, repeating terms, but no one knows exactly what they're talking about. They just say, it's like growth mindset, no? So you're going to look cool because you just throw that name there, no? I think that culture, it's something more concrete than most people think. And it's the combination of how we think, feel, and act. So basically, the mindsets or beliefs that you mentioned define how people think, the emotions that basically what drives people, connections, and the glue, how we feel in the place that we work. Do we like it? Do we hate it? Are we excited? Are we, I don't know.
Yeah.
And also the behaviors. So some people say that culture is the way we do things here, but I think that what we do, the behaviors, it's interlinked with the emotions and the mindsets. For example, if I believe that my boss will never approve a risky idea, then I'm not going to innovate. Not because I can't innovate, but because of that belief. So those connections within beliefs, emotions, and behaviors are basically what drive culture. So that's what makes culture important. You talk about performance, right? Culture precedes performance. So we cannot tell our team, hey, perform well. Culture is like a system, different elements that we need to adjust and work on to make sure that we get the right outcome. I always like to compare the culture of a company like the culture of a city or a town. There are some elements that are all interlinked. So there's some approaches, some laws, some rules and regulations that are set by the leaders, let's say the mayor of the city, like decide what's the maximum speed in a particular street, or where there's a stop sign or a traffic light. But then in the end, how you drive, the car you drive, the color of the car, the music you're listening to, those things, if you travel alone, if you like a large car or a small car, those comes with you. So that combination between corporate choices and individual choices is what builds culture.
Amazing. I like the metaphor you use, a car, like how does it really works. Now that's how you did touch about the performance, right? Now people did talk about it. Culture has, certain impact of performance. What would be the right take? Does culture has an influence on the performance of the people?
Absolutely, because as I mentioned before, like first of all, what do we mean by performance, right? Performance could be that people work 25 hours a day. Performance could be that people are efficient. Performance can be that people sell more products. Performance can be that people have more efficient meetings. So first of all, we need to define what's performance. But most importantly, it's culture, as I mentioned before, is like the system, no? So Tony Hayes, who used to be the CEO and founder, he died last year, of Zappos, the shoe retailer. He thought of himself as a gardener. No, he thought that his role was to create the environment, take care of the soil, the conditions, etc. But then let the garden grow and manage it by himself. So let people do whatever they want. So as a leader, you're not. You shouldn't focus on performance because that's an outcome. You should focus on the system. So what are the things that people need in order to perform well? And what are the things that are getting in the way that don't? It could be maybe people need more budget. Maybe there's fear. You talk about psychological safety. If in my garden, I feel afraid of growing, if I feel afraid of blooming, then I'm going to stick with the rest. No, so rather than trying. So those are the things that basically performance is not just an individual issue. It has to do with individual factors. Of course, your commitment, your education, your background, etc., your skills. But in most of the cases, 70–80% of performance is a cultural problem. It's a cultural issue. So people don't innovate, not because they're stupid or they're not creative, but basically they're afraid of being punished. The last person in the company that tried to do something different was fired. So those things are part of the system. Are there rules and norms? For example, if I have to work in 20 projects, when am I going to innovate? If I don't allocate time for innovation, if my boss, for example, there are companies that people lock or block their calendars to do deep work. So I'm going to block from 8 to 10 and I'm going to work on a new project. But then, and this happens, for example, in Facebook, my manager comes and says, you know what, I don't care about your innovation time. I want you to attend my meeting, and I steal that time away. So the system is punishing my potential innovation contributions.
So you raised lovely 2 points. Number one is working like 25 hours. Where do you get the time to be innovative? So is that the performance, working to that element? Number two, the last point you shared, right? I would reserve, like, is it a multitasking element you're talking about? Like, you work on a project and you want me to come to the meeting, which one I have to do? So that confusion will come again. So let me go to the first one. And I read that article, right? Always on culture, right? You shared very recently with the remote work context. How does it that really come into the picture? Because we have seen with hybrid work, there are a lot of research came in like a couple of months ago from Microsoft, their institute. Productivity has been high, but on cost of the human element. People have been working even the office after office hours. How does this culture come into picture? Is it that we are very infant to this particular line of work setup, or is it purposely done? What do you think?
I think like we always need to see things in context, right? So this is the beginning of a new era, right? The change, people have been talking about the future of work all the time, right? So the future is already here. Nothing happens overnight. Unfortunately, in our society, we see the outcome and we say, oh, look at this. But we haven't observed that the things that have been happening behind the scenes, little by little. So the pandemic accelerated a new contract with work that was already in place. People want to have a purpose, people want to have flexibility, to have more control, etc. So yes, people have been working a lot more for many reasons. First, because everything basically became chaotic and no one was ready for this disruption. We're learning how to adapt. I always said that disruptions bring out the best and the worst out of organizations. So in some cases, companies that didn't trust their employees, that were controlling them, they became even worse. So the companies that used to have too many useless meetings, they became even worse and started scheduling more and more meetings. So I think there are two things. First, like everything, it's going to be some kind of process in which things are going to start settling down because people cannot continue working at this pace. We are seeing that a lot of people are resigning their jobs because they are prioritizing quality of life and work over like working nonstop. Organizations are realizing that money is not enough. Money is important, but it's not enough. But also that now the power is not just on the companies, especially in countries like UK and some other Europeans, and especially in US. People say, you know what, there are plenty of job opportunities. If I'm not treated with respect, I'm going to go and work somewhere else. So in that regards, companies are realizing that they need to redesign the experience and create an environment that's more protective. One of the key things is we have mindsets that we have been applying. When I say we, I think most managers through decades. And one of them is that if people are in the office, if people are visible, if people are working countless hours, that means they are great employees and they're performing. In that regards, we build a culture of people sending lots of emails, creating lots of meetings to show that they're busy because they believe that then their managers are believe that they're productive. So in the end, they're having productivity. There are many companies that are moving towards more mindful working environments and are getting better results. So Buffer, for example, the social media company, established a 4-day work week starting last year. They've been there like almost for 2 years now, experimenting, and they have great results. Not only they achieve the same work, but actually people are focusing on more meaningful projects. People are more excited. One thing that they realize is because they don't work on Fridays, that time is not that I'm not working. It's time for me to rest, but also our creative juices, our ideas happen when we're not working. If you're in a computer writing emails, you're not going to come up with a new idea. But when you're walking in the park or doing whatever you like, cooking, whatever you like to do, boom, biking, like ideas are going to come. So people can become more creative. On the other hand, one thing that the company realizes flexibility. Every team works from Monday through Thursday, but the customer service, because they need to take care of the customers, those people rotate in which days of the week they take off. Another thing is accountability. Giving people freedom and flexibility doesn't mean removing accountability. In Buffer, if you're behind schedule, you have to work. No one's going to tell you, but it's your decision to maybe this Friday, I'm going to work 2 hours so I catch up and then I can take the next Friday full off. So that's the model that we're working. We are still in the beginning of a new era, to your point, and we're designing how that's going to play.
Fantastic. I really like the fact, the last part you told, like, giving that space to people to, freedom to perform. And at the same time, you should have the accountability. We talked about autonomy, but autonomy does not differentiate with the accountability. When autonomy comes, yes, of course, the accountability need to come in. Fantastic, Gustavo. Thank you very much for sharing that tool, shedding that light on this particular topic. Next, it's a very interesting question, because when I see your company name, like Fearless Culture, I had a curiosity why Gustavo put this particular name. What is the whole thing about, right? So why do you refer this particular Fearless Culture element? What is the whole thing about?
Good point. I think that I talk about the power of emotions and emotions in play. And one of the most pervasive emotions in life, and especially in the workplace, is fear, right? And fear, I mean, emotions are not bad. Fear could be like a signal. If your house is on fire, it's okay to feel afraid, because that's going to make you more aware and it's going to help you react faster and so on and so forth. But in most of cases, fear paralyzes us. So if I'm afraid of making mistakes, if I'm afraid of breaking the rules, if I'm afraid of being judged by other people, if I'm afraid that I'm going to be punished for thinking differently, then I start limiting myself. And the same happens at a team level. So fearless is not the absence of fear, but it's actually coaching organizations and teams to be able to confront those fears. So basically, what are we afraid of? Are we afraid of failure? Are we afraid of making mistakes? And making sure that we help them go through that path of embracing the fear and making sure that it doesn't act like a limitation. So we call it leading change from a place of courage. No, I know, but the word courage comes from the French language, and corps in French means a heart.
Okay.
So right. Courage, the word means leading from the heart.
Right. So I remember this phrase, right, from Dr. Susan David on her book Emotional Agility. She says, fear walks when courage exists, like something like that. She says in her book. I can remember on that particular line. So I'm just trying to figure it out. Does building a psychological safety environment is something we are talking about in the fearless culture?
Absolutely, it's a critical element, and it's also one of the key blocks of our culture design canvas that you mentioned at the very beginning. Actually, the canvas has 10 blocks and has 3 sections. One is the core, which is the things that we want people to align on. Then it has the emotional culture and the functional culture. Within the emotional culture, that we have team rituals, feedback, and then the third element is psychological safety. One thing about psychological safety that's critical is it's not the same as trust. Trust is something that happens between 2 people. So Azim trusts Gustavo, and Gustavo, that's why we're having this conversation. We say, hey, let's get together in a café and have a nice talk, right? But then psychological safety is something that the entire team provides. So it's not up to the leader, but actually to all team members to make sure that they hold that net. So if I want to take the leap, if I want to jump, say something, share an idea, ask questions, push back, it's going to be safe and people are going to take care of me. I'm not going to be judged. I'm not going to be punished. I'm not going to be criticized.
So Gustavo, here a bit of I want to just like try and put you on the spot, right? Let's say a culture which is very closed, right? They do have that open culture, open door policy, everything they talk about in the whole world, everything is there, but it is not practically happening. Can we infuse psychological safety into that particular culture? Is it a risky business to do, or can it be done? What is your take?
It can be done in any type of culture, and we work with different types of organizations, from more normal to more chaotic and crazy. We've seen everything in between, and it's possible. In the end, the most important thing is if there's a will. So are the leaders of the company willing to improve things, even if they are going to make mistakes, even if they don't know how to do it, even if they're going to default to their old patterns, right?
Mm.
But is there a will? And also people. As I mentioned before, also psychological safety is something that the entire team. So we've been working with companies in which the executive team probably doesn't want to change, but then the middle management wants. Well, what we coach people is don't wait for your dad or mom to change. You can start building that inside. So that's the power of subcultures. You can bring strong subcultures even within a culture that's more toxic. That shouldn't be an excuse, to your point.
Why I asked this question, recently I had a conversation with one of the partners, right? Then I asked him, there's a 360 assessment. Do you want to take it up? Then that person quickly responded, look, Azim, this particular organized culture is so different. It is not used to it. So we don't need to go there to 360 element. Right. So I was like surprised, like we are talking about the era, we are talking about, people getting, emotional connection, being open and honest, be authentic. And this person coming tell me, and it's a big financial institution, by the way, right? And then they're saying, no, you can't do 360. So it's a shocking element, isn't it, Gustavo, when people talks like that?
It is. My point would be, I mean, sometimes we confuse, I don't understand, I don't want to react to a case and a situation I don't really know, no? But because it's easy to give advice out of the blue. But trying to step back, I think that what are you trying to solve? If you're trying to aim for feedback and a 360 is something that for whatever reason, right or wrong, the client is resisting, well, there are other ways. So basically, what other ways can we coach to start promoting feedback? So for example, in Patagonia, they practice one thing that's really great, the clothing company, which is managers are encouraged to ask for feedback rather than give feedback. Because usually managers are the source of truth, they know it all, and they're always telling people, you should do this, you should do that, well, whatever. So they shift the power balance, and basically it's, I'm a manager, I'm running a meeting, I finished the meeting, guys, what worked, what didn't work, what I can do better. So maybe by simple questions, you can start shifting that and start promoting feedback, so people get more comfortable. There are also easier ways to do that. Spotify practice is something that they call the 70-20-10. We know that one of the issues about feedback, the word feedback, that we get stuck into what happened, the past, and that doesn't help us move forward. So Marshall Goldsmith talk about feed forward. So the same as Spotify, the 70-20-10 rule means that only 10% of any feedback conversation should be about what happened, 20 about what's happening today, and the majority of the time is going to be spending into where do we want to go and how are we going to get there. So there are things that can help you improve feedback when a client doesn't want to do a 360.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Right. So, my most probably the last questions before we get into the golden nugget part, right? I know this is a question for you, which you would like. The question is, can workplace culture be designed? And if we to design, what are the key areas to be focused when we really design a culture?
Absolutely, that's a great question, because I define myself as a culture designer, and we have also, besides doing consulting work with different types of companies across the world, we also do a lot of programs, and we have one that is a culture design certification. So we have trained over 500 people across the world to become culture designers. So yeah, I guess that it can be, because people are doing it. But let me step back. I think that sometimes people react to the word design because they think that design is like controlling, like you draw a line and this is the culture. And design is a co-creation process, and it's a dynamic process that involves leaders, involves facilitators, and involves employee. So we are all trying to codify what our culture is. How do we want to work? What do we want to achieve together? So definitely it can be designed. I think that people in the past, the way we designed products was a designer basically sit in a room and design, this is going to be the new AirPod, and that's it. In today's world, for the past 15 or 10 years, designers are more engaged into understanding users and co-designing with them. Well, the same happens with culture. the first part of any culture design is about empathy, understanding how different groups in the company see culture, not how we think it is, how the leader sees culture, but how different segments, different groups, different countries sees the culture. Through there, we understand, okay, here's where we are, here's what's working, here's what's not working. Where do we want to get from here? And this is a conversation that we have as a team. Once we define the new path, we start saying, okay, to your point, how can we improve our feedback practices? What do we need to do to improve psychological safety? So then it comes to different methods and tools that we can apply to move in that direction. So definitely it can be designed. We've been working with lots of companies for the past 4 years. And most of the most successful cultures that you see that people say, oh, look at Apple, look at Amazon, they didn't happen by chance, they happened by design. So the people that were involved were really purposeful and meaningful about what they wanted to achieve. It wasn't just luck.
Right. So what would be the key areas to be focused when we are getting into design element? What would be that?
The key thing, as I mentioned, is there are 3 key steps. One is mapping, codifying what's the real culture play. And usually people say, let's jump into improving. No. If you don't understand where you are, if you're using a GPS and you don't know your exact location, then you're never going to find the right route to get to your destination. The second part is assessment. Where are we? What's working? Which blocks of the canvas are good? Which are so-so, which are completely off? For example, what's the point about let's develop values if then people are feel that psychological safety is really low and they're afraid about speaking up? Who's going to talk about values in an open way if they're really afraid? Once you assess, you prioritize the elements of culture that you need to preserve, improve, change, and then you start tackling one at a time, because you don't change culture overnight and you don't change every element at the same time. You go one by one and make progress.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So it has been an amazing conversation. So I think there are a lot of takeaways for me from that. So before I let you go, we have come to an end. Before I let you go, I just want one golden nugget from your end for our listeners. I always ask my guests one key takeaway, like what they can practically, practice in their day-to-day life as a leader, as an employee, as a human being, how to create that perfect culture. I know perfect is a tough task because nothing can be perfect. It can be improved daily basis. So what would be a one key takeaway for our listeners?
I think the most important, I'm going to give you one more conceptual and one more concrete. The most conceptual thing is understanding that culture evolution, it's a journey, not a destination. So let's be less obsessed about where we're going to arrive and enjoy the journey, because that's where magic happens. You never know where you're going to arrive. So what will happen with the disruption of the pandemic, we need to adjust on a more regular basis, but make sure that we are growing in the right direction. Then, as a more concrete thing, something I just posted recently, it's the idea of should we go back? People are thinking that culture is about being together in the office. And I say that the office space is like the new offsite. So usually teams took an offsite to think about big things, take perspective. Well, that's the way we should think about the office. Not a place to be full of interruptions, but a place for action.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So that's the time that we have, ladies and gentlemen. Today, my key takeaway is 70-20-10 and the feed forward. Right? It really struck my mind. I'm going to take that away. And yes, I have heard about Marshall Goldsmith about feed forward, but 70-20-10 is something I just got stuck. And the other element, the designing the culture. How to design. When you speak about design, you said that it's not about control mechanism. It's about how people can replace it's going to be. So that's my key takeaway. I believe our listeners got plenty of takeaway. And of course, my special gratitude towards Gustavo. Thank you very much for your valuable time you have checked in and sharing this particular whole element with our listeners. And of course, you can get connected to Gustavo through his social media, and it's very available. And I'll invite you to visit his website, www.fearlessculture.design. He's some fantastic work around, and there are a lot of tools he provides, and every week he comes with a fantastic blog, and it's really amazing. I have been really fan of it and just keep on reading every week once I got it. So Gustavo, once again, thank you very much for your valuable time you spent on the cafe and inspiring people to live a meaningful life and pursue their passion.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sim, and thank you everyone for listening. And let's stay in touch. Reach out if you have any questions, if you want to chat, if you want to talk about culture. I'm always open.
Thank you.
Take care.